Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're back with some more Automation the Car Company Tycoon game. Continuing on with the campaign roleplay of the Edison Car Company in 2011. And the model we're going to be looking at in this video is the Edison Star, which is the mid-size family sedan and the Edison Car Company's lineup. And we're going to start off taking a look at the base model of only a few different models. I try to keep things simple with how many models we're going to be looking at. And starting off with the body and chassis choice, I ended up with this 110-inch wheelbase body, which has a number of variations that you can choose from, which we're going to be looking at in a little bit. But the chassis is a monocoque chassis made out of AHS steel with a front transverse engine placement, McPherson strut in the front, semi-trailing arm in the rear, and corrosion-resistant steel as the panel material. As far as the styling goes, just give you a quick look at that. And as I was saying, for the variations of the body, there's a fair number. And as a matter of fact, this is going to be the basis of a couple other models that we're going to be looking at in the future. In any case, the drive type is transverse front-wheel drive. The engine we're going to be using for this trim is a 2.4-liter inline-4 with an aluminum silicone block and head with a single overhead cam and 3 valves per cylinder with VVL. The crank is made out of cast iron, the conrods out of I-beam steel, and the pistons are forged. For the compression, I have 10.5. Cam profile is set at 34, and the VVL profile is set at 59, and this does use VVT as well. This is a naturally aspirated engine, and it uses direct injection for the fuel system. A single throttle, standard intake, and regular fuel. Fuel mixture set at 15, ignition timing at 44, and RPM limit is set at 7,200. The headers are short cast, and the exhaust diameter comes in at 2¼ inches. This uses a 3-way cat and a reverse flow muffler. The end result of all of that is 167 horsepower and 151 foot-pounds of torque. Now jumping into the actual trim setup, starting with the gearbox, I have a 6-speed automatic. I did not set up a trim with a manual transmission just to keep things simple, and the automatic transmission trims are the ones I figure would sell in the biggest numbers in the American market. In any case, as I said, 6-speed automatic. The 5th and 6th gear are set up to be economy gears going beyond that estimated top speed. The end result of that is a 0 to 62 time of 9.4 seconds, a fuel economy of 28.6 miles per gallon, and some wheel spin of 6.2%. I do use a viscous LSD and all of the trims that we'll be looking at. The tire setup is medium compound road with 17-inch rims on a 650 millimeter wheel diameter, 205 millimeter in the front for tire width, and 205 in the rear. I have a little bit of rim offset to fill out the confines of the chassis, and we have steel rim material, at least for this trim. For the brakes, we have solid disc 2-piston up front and solid disc 1-piston in the rear. I did try and balance the braking a little bit by reducing the brake size in the rear. We have fully clad under tray, and the cooling airflow is going roughly 10 above required. For the interior, I have 5 seats, standard interior, standard entertainment, and I have as standard power steering, ABS, traction control, and electronic stability control for the same reasons I pointed out in the Luna video, that this is now required by law in the United States for the 2011 model year. And we have standard safety for the 2000s. The suspension setup, we have standard springs, gas monotube damper, and passive sway bar, and this is the suspension setup that I have. So let's go ahead and jump into the test track, where we see a top speed of 140.5 miles an hour. We have weight a little over 3,200 pounds, and the weight distribution is on the front heavy side, but this being a front-wheel drive vehicle, we kind of expect that. And we already discussed the 0 to 62 time of 9.4 seconds. Let's go ahead and get our track time. and it comes out to 1 minute 37.87. So let's get a comparison to our next trim, which is going to use a V6 engine. So let's start off by looking at that engine. Now, I call this engine the EV 3.211. The 11 designating the year period that I built it. So if I had a future variant of this engine, all I'd have to do is modify that number so I could keep track of what year period I'm working with. The 3.2 is the displacement. This is a 3.2 liter V6, which is the V standing for the fact that this is a V engine, in this case a V6. And the E stands for every, as in every model in this year period is going to be using this V6, with the only exceptions being the Comet and the Shooting Star, which use a more high-performance, high-displacement engine. So this engine being placed in every model, I tried to make it a compromise of things. So as far as displacement goes and the overall performance, it's meant to be that compromise. So as we discussed, it's a V6 with an aluminum silicone block and head. It's a dual overhead cam with 4 valves per cylinder, and it has VVL. This has a forged steel crank, I-beam steel conrods, and lightweight forged piston. Now, there are a couple different variants of this engine. There is the BNA6, which is the base, naturally aspirated 6. There is the CNA6, which you'll be seeing later when we cover the Constellation, the C standing for Constellation, and the TC6, which is a turbocharged variant, which you'll again be seeing later. And that is similar to the turbocharged engine that we used in the Luna, which is a more EcoBoost engine to help with economy. And each of those variants are going to be set up a little bit differently. But for this variant, we have a 10.5 compression, 33 cam profile, and 59 VVL profile. This has VVT on all cams. It's a naturally aspirated engine with direct fuel injection and single throttle and standard intake and regular fuel. Fuel mixture is set at 15, ignition timing at 45, and RPM limit at 7,900, which is why we were using lightweight forged piston rather than a forged piston, because of the higher RPM levels and the need for higher reliability at those levels. The headers are short cast. We have a single exhaust at 2 3/4 inches, 3-way cat, and a single reverse flow muffler. The end result of that is 246 horsepower and 209 foot-pounds of torque. For the trim setup, starting off with the gearbox, again, we have a 6-speed automatic, and again, it's set up roughly about the same, with the 5th and 6th gear going beyond the estimated top speed for economy. The end result of that is 27.8 miles per gallon and a 0 to 62 time of 7.6 seconds. Wheel spin is a little bit more than what we saw before at 8.4%. The tire setup is the same as we saw before. The brake setup is a little bit different, as I had to balance for different weights, so you see bigger brake size in the rear, for example. Aerodynamics is also changed, as the required cooling has gone up with the more powerful engine, so that has the cooling that we're using has gone up to match. For the interior, this is more or less the same as the standard, the other standard interior with the inline 4. Suspension is going to be set up slightly different because of the difference in weight, but more or less not too much different. So jumping into the test track, we now have a top speed of 157.9 miles an hour, and the weight has gone up to an even 3,400 pounds with a little bit extra there, 0.1. It's much more front heavy than the previous model, but we have a heavier engine up front. And the 0 to 62 time comes in at 7.5 seconds, which is definitely quicker than we had before. I'm noticing that the cornering G's has also dropped off, but I think, considering that we have more weight and we're more front heavy, that makes perfect sense. So our track time, we end up with 1 minute 33.27, which is a marked improvement, more than 4 seconds, over our inline 4 engined variant. Let's jump into the last trim here with the premium trim. So this has a few more differences. The gearbox is set up roughly the same. We do have a slower 0 to 62 time and also worse fuel economy due to a an increase in weight, a pretty significant increase in weight. The tire setup is a little bit different, though. We have alloy rims, and the styling that I've chosen, I tried to go for more of a premium look. The brakes, I've switched to vented discs up front to get the brake fade under control. Honestly, it's down to pretty much nothing. And the brake size has also increased in the rear, as we do have more weight to contend with. Cooling airflow should be the same, though, as this is the same engine as with the standard trim. The interior, we now have premium interior and premium entertainment, but no other change besides. Suspension is going to be roughly the same, although there might be slight tweaks here and there because of the increase in weight. And jumping into the test track, we have a top speed of 157.9 miles an hour. The weight has gone up by more than 100 pounds over the other V6 trim, although it is not quite as front heavy as it was before, as we have more weight distributed throughout the vehicle rather than just a weight added to the front. Porting Gs have gone down because of that increased weight. The overall track time we're going to get, probably no surprise, is going to be slower, which is what we see, but it's not too much slower. And that's one of the things I try to always do when I move up to a premium trim, is try and keep it somewhat close to the performance numbers that I get out of the standard trim. In any case, let's go ahead and jump into the inline 4 standard trim so that we can look at the market data a little bit later. But first, let's start off with the project setup. So I have a little bit more of a efficient focus rather than a learning focus, but not quite as much as we had with the Luna and that same setup for the engine. As far as factory setup goes, I have a large factory, which is what I usually use. The cars per day that we're making is 755, and the distribution of those cars with an automation of 80 and shifts set at 2.5, we have the most vehicles being produced is the premium trim. And I figure with this year period particularly, the car manufacturers in the American market are seeing an uptick in sales in the premium decked out, optioned out trim. So I thought to reflect that, we would produce more vehicles in the with the premium trim. And then I thought the next most popular trim would be our standard baseline trim, and then the V6 standard trim following after it. So to correspond with that, we have our engine production, and this is, I believe, the inline 4 engine production. And considering that we're not producing as many overall cars as we are for the V6, we don't need as many. So I actually went down to a medium factory and 80 automation again, but I brought it down to 1.9 shifts. And the reason I switched to that medium factory is if I stuck with a large factory, even bringing the shifts all the way down, I would be producing way more engines than I would need. So that's why I went down to a smaller size factory. But for the V6s, I kept with a large factory. And for this, with 80 automation, I used 2.1 shifts to match more or less the engines we needed for that V6. Getting into the market data here, the 3 market segments we're doing the best with this trim are the city economy, city, and sports budget. We're doing pretty well in the family markets here, family sport, commuter as well as fun and light sports, and we always do well in the pony segment, regardless of what we build. Usually speaking, I have a standard 5% markup, which gives us a little over $15,000 for the price. So as far as market segments I expected with this model to hit the best, I would say I'm more looking for the family market rather than these city markets that we hit. But we're honestly not that far off from the city market to the family market, just a slight bit of difference. So I find that very interesting, and I wonder if a big part of this is the improved economy that we've been seeing with some of the recent models of why we're hitting the city market segment a little bit more there. In any case, let's go ahead and jump into the next trim, the V6 standard trim. And again, with a 5% markup, we're now looking at a little under $17,000, so definitely an increase in price. And now we're hitting a few different market segments. We're hitting the commuter market segment, the pony market segment, and our strongest market segment, the sports budget. Now, these are not market segments we're necessarily trying to go for. Really, honestly, we're going for these three and these two. And we're still doing very well in those market segments, with the family market segment not being too far behind the commuter market segment, which is the main market segment we're looking for, as well as the family sport market segment. City and city economy are not doing too bad either. They're actually improvements over our previous trim, but they're not doing quite as well as the family market segments. And our last trim, the premium trim with the V6. We are again doing well in the commuter segment, but this time we're doing well in the family sport and the sports budget segments. I believe we were doing well in that in the previous V6 trim, but the family sport I think is a little bit new. So we're not seeing quite as good of a performance in the city segments. And I'm going to assume this is due to a drop in affordability because of the increase in price. So again, with a 5% markup, we're doing, our price is a little over $19,000. So again, we're doing well in the market segments we want to be doing in. The family market segment, the family sport market segment is a nice segment to be hitting as well. But we probably would want to be hitting the family premium segment a little bit stronger with this trim than we are. Here we're only doing a little bit above 100, and as a result, we're not even seeing this being highlighted. It's in green, but we don't see the numbers presented, so we're not doing quite as well as we are in some of these other segments. Now, we're doing decently in the city premium segment, so I think that's a minor victory for us, but I would have liked to have done better in the family premium segment. All right, so let's go ahead and do a comparison with the models that we have so far, and that is the Luna and the Star. So we have a little bit of an improvement in drivability between the Luna and the Star. So at our worst, we have 56, which at our best, we have 56 here. So we're matching that, but we're exceeding it with our best drivability performance here. So comparatively here, when you compare automatics to automatics, as this is an automatic, and technically this is as well, we're not doing too far off from what we got with the Luna, but slightly better. Sportiness is improved, except for the manual transmission, which is doing better than our Star, but considering that we do not have a manual transmission trim for the Star in this year period, there's not really a comparable model for this. But when you have automatic versus automatic again, this is definitely an improvement, and it's not too surprising that we have this improvement because we have more powerful engines. As far as comfort goes, I would say we're more or less matching what we were getting. Again, automatic versus automatic. Base trim to base trim here, we're getting roughly what we got before. Now, our turbocharged engine versus our V6 engine, we're getting, again, matched performance. So I'd say, for the most part, this is pretty much equal between the Luna and the Star. As far as prestige, again, no surprise here. We're doing better with the Star, although we are equaling the number we got with the Luna, which is very interesting to see. Safety-wise, we have an improvement here as well, but that's not too surprising considering the increase in weight. As far as practicality goes, interestingly enough, we have a slight dip here with the Star, although we do gain out an off-road ability and utility here. As far as reliability goes, the Luna has always been a strong performer, and I've always built it to be a very reliable model. And even at our least reliable model, using a turbocharged engine, we're matching the best performance from the Star. That's good to see from the Luna, and I always try and build the Luna for these results. As far as economy goes, it's not too surprising the Luna is also doing very well here and beating the performance of the Star because, again, that's one of the strong suits of the Luna, and it has less weight to contend with and a less powerful engine and a number of other things that fall in its favor. Moving on to our emissions, we actually have some interesting results here with our V6s actually outperforming our inline 4s in the Luna. Now, the inline 4 in the Star is not getting the same performance as far as emissions go, and we're not matching the performance of the EcoBoost engine, but this is designed specifically around lowering emissions and having a greater fuel economy, so it's not really fair to compare this engine with any of the engines in the Star, which are not designed in that way. We also see another interesting thing when we go on to the production units. Comparing, again, like to like, we don't have a manual transmission in the Star, so we can't really compare this trim. But comparing our two standard trims, which have automatic transmissions, versus the two automatic transmissions in the Luna, we see that we definitely have less production units. Now, we have more production units with the premium trim, but considering we don't have a premium trim with the Luna, again, that's not a fair comparison. As far as cost that goes, though, we definitely have an increased cost. Again, comparing like to like, you have over 6,000 material cost for our base trim of the Star, and the base automatic trim of the Luna is a little over 5,500, close enough to 5,600. So that's a difference of more than 400. In any case, I think that wraps up our comparison, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner, signing out.